Hello wine person, welcome to the session on systematic approach to tasting wine, also called SAT for short. This is a very important video because, all videos are important, but this is specifically important because part of your exam will be a blind tasting of two wine. So in this video, I will explain you the theory, how to use the systematic approach to tasting for level 3, which is different from level 2. And then when you know the theory about how to taste wine, what to look for in a wine, it is of course very important for you to actually taste wine and practice what you learned. So in this video, I will be explaining the purpose of SAT, format of the SAT, using the SAT, how to prepare for the tasting, appearance and other observations, nose and lexicon, palate and conclusion. So let's go. So the purpose of SAT is for you to accurately know how to describe wine. First of all, to learn the vocabulary, to understand what the vocabulary means when you're describing wine. If somebody asks you, why the wine tastes like lemon, why the wine tastes like blackberry, for you not just to use this vocabulary, but also to be able to explain it. And then the final part is when you describe a wine, to be able to come to a logical conclusion on the quality and potential for aging for the wine that you described. And then this tool of knowing how to describe wines you can use in real life. In a professional setting, it is very important to know how to evaluate wine if you're purchasing wine for your establishment. And if you're enthusiast and consumer, for you to be able to describe the wines that you like. The format of SAT. So, like I said, part of your level 3 exam will be tasting two wines blindly. So the first thing that you need to know is how do you get points on the exam. So there's 20 total points for white wines and 21 points for red wine. There's additional point for red wine because of the comments on tannin, which are not mentioned for white wines. The format of the SAT is, it has two parts. First is the description part, and the final part is the conclusion. So the first part is divided into appearance, nose, palate. On the appearance, I'll go in this video. We'll go into detail in all the sections. Just to give you an overview, for the appearance you get 2 points. For the nose you get 7 points. For the palate, 9 points for the white wine, 10 points for the red wine because of the tannin. And then you're going to use your description and you're going to come to the conclusion on quality of the wine that you described and readiness for drinking or potential for aging. And I'll explain all of that. And I'll also explain the lexicon, which is recommended for you to use to describe wines. You can use other vocabulary, additional vocabulary as well, as long as it has sense when you're describing the wine. Using the SAT. So when you come to this in-person sessions, when you taste wines, it's very important for you to calibrate your palate. Calibration of palate means you're going to be following the guidance of your educator. So if the educator says that the wine has high acidity, this is your guide to, when you taste the wine, to understand and remember how a high acidity wine feels. If the educator says medium alcohol, for you to have guidance how the medium alcohol feels. And for all the rest parts of the SAT. So the first part of the success of passing the tasting part of the exam is knowing the SAT by heart. The way that I did this is repetition. So I read the SAT, I try to memorize all the elements on the SAT, and then I write it down and I see if I missed anything. So if I missed anything, you know, I'm focusing on what I missed, and then I redo it again until it comes as a, you know, second nature. So yes, it's a little bit challenging to remember maybe everything on the beginning, but with practice, it's gonna come naturally. The second thing is to use the vocabulary as on the SAT. So you're always just gonna be using, for example, if on the SAT it says pronounce aroma intensity, you're gonna use the term pronounce. You're not gonna use high. If the body of the wine is described as full, you're gonna describe the wine as full body, not high body. If the acidity is, for example, high, you're not gonna say the acidity is pronounced. You're gonna say the acidity is high. So follow the vocabulary on the SAT. There's a difference between hyphen lines and wines that says EG, examples. So when you have a hyphen line, which is this long line, you're going to need to use one description only. For example, for the color, for the intensity of the color, it can be pale, medium, and deep. You cannot say pale to medium or medium to deep. You need to choose one. Otherwise, you would not get a point, even if one of your description is correct. And this is the same for all the rest part of the SAT. If you have, for example, EG next on the SAT, it means that you can use several descriptors, and this is usually used for aromas and flavors. The scale on the WSET level 3 is a 5-point scale. On the WSET level 2, it was a 3-point scale. On WSET level 3 in wines, it's a 5-point scale description, meaning that most of the description of on the SAT has a 5-point scale. For example, the wine can be light body, medium body, and full body, but it also has additional two lines of medium minus and medium plus. The reason for this is for you to have more precision when describing these wines. So just to make it clear, everything that was low, medium, or high or pronounced on level 2 still stays the same, except that medium minus and medium plus will be used for more precision for the description. It means there's a lot of wines that when we use the WSET level 2 3-point scale, there's a lot of wines that were actually they were more medium or a little bit lower than medium. So we're going to use on level 3 a 5-point scale for wines that are not really pronounced, but they're more than medium, or wines that are not really light or low and they're not really medium. So they're medium, minus, and plus, so more precision. Okay. Preparing for tasting. WSET SAT format is not really suitable for every occasion. Even though for me, for example, now it's a second nature. Whenever I have a wine, you know, I always try to see how the wine looks, how it smells, how it tastes, and to evaluate the quality and readiness for drinking very fast. But when you're preparing for your WSET course exam for tasting, and you want to focus on describing the wine properly, you want to have an environment so you can focus on all of this. So the conditions that you need is good lighting. The best is if you have natural light. odor free, so of course the good light is for you to see the wine clearly. Odor free environment, so there's no additional smells that are going to interfere with the smell of the wine. Space for glasses and for you to take notes. I would highly recommend when you taste wines with the SAT, when you're preparing for your course and exam, always to take notes of the wines that you're tasting. Spittoons, for you to spit all the wines that you're tasting. You don't need to drink the wine in order to be able to evaluate it, especially on the course. You're going to be tasting a lot of wines and you need to spit them so you're focused. You need to have a clean palate. Again, clean palate, not to interfere with the flavors and elements in the wine. For you to have water, to stay hydrated, and also to cleanse your palate between the wines. Notes for recording, like I mentioned, and on the course we pour 50 ml or around 2 ounces, which is enough to taste the wine properly. So now I'm going to be starting to show you how the SAT looks like. We're going to go through all the section and I'll be explaining each one of them. So the first part of the SAT is the appearance. So the appearance is how the wine looks. On the exam, you're going to be getting 2 points here. One is going to be for the intensity and one for the color. Clarity. All the wines that you're going to be tasting on the course will be clear, so you're not going to get points for clarity, but just for you to understand, the wine can be clear or hazy, but all the wines on the course will be clear, and especially the wines on the exam will be clear. Other observations like leg tears, deposit, petulance, bubbles. Again, you're not going to get a wine with deposit. I'll explain what legs and tears indicate in a wine. You might have during the course some wines that have petulance, a little bit of CO2, and bubbles are mostly for wines that are sparkling wines. But again, you're not going to get a point on other observations. The points are just for the intensity and the color. So just to give you an idea, legs and tears, they indicate either alcohol in the wine or residual sugar. So usually wines that are lower in alcohol and are dry, they have tears and legs that go, they're thinner and faster, versus a wine that is high in alcohol or have residual sugar, the legs and tears are a little bit thicker and they go slower. Deposit is when the wines age and they develop deposit over age. You're not really going to have wines with deposit. On the course, petulance, the wines can have some CO2, especially if they're young wines, and when they're bottled young, they might retain some carbon dioxide. And bubbles are mostly for, if you see clear bubbles in the wine, it's an indication of sparkling wine. So like I said, all the wines on the exam will be clear. The two things that you're getting points on is the intensity and the color. The intensity is how much color the wine has, and it can be described as pale, medium, and deep. The way to evaluate the color of the wine is by tilting the glass under white surface, tilting the glass and seeing how much color goes towards the rim. So you're not going to be looking for the intensity of the color on the rim. You're going to be looking at the core of the glass, the center of the glass, and how far the color goes towards the rim. So if the color goes all the way to the rim, the wines are going to be described as deep. If the color is only in the center and it's very little, it means that the wine is pale. And if the color goes further away from the core, but not all the way to the end, the wine is going to be described as medium in color. For the color itself, the white wines can be described as a lemon green. So just to give you an indication here, a lemon green is the only color that actually has two words that can be used as one descriptor. So a lemon green. And lemon green usually comes from wines that are very young and or from a cool climate. So for example, the newest vintage of Sauvignon Blanc will be quite frequently lemon green. Other colors for white wines are lemon, gold, amber, and brown. For rosé wines, it's pink, salmon, and orange. For red wines, it's purple, ruby, garnet, tawny, and brown. So let me explain the colors. So most white wines are going to be lemon in color. Like I mentioned, lemon green is for very young wines, usually coming from a cool climate or where the grapes are picked earlier. What you also need to understand with the color of the wine will indicate how young or how young or old the wine is. For white wines, it can also indicate if the wine had any contact with oxygen. Also, if the wine maybe went through malolactic conversion or has ripe grapes. With red wine, the color can indicate the thickness of the skin. So wines that are more paler in color could indicate grape varieties that are thin skin grape varieties, like for example Gamay and Pinot Noir, versus a more deeper color wine can indicate a wine that has more thick skin and a wine that is made more extractively to extract more color from these wines. Of course, you also need to understand that even a Cabernet Sauvignon that has thick skin can be produced in a lighter color style because of less extraction, for example. All right, so all the white wines, they're going to be paler in color. They're going to have less color when they're young, and they're going to get more deeper with age. Versus red wines can be deep in color when they're young, and they're going to get more paler as they age. So white wines are going to start their life as lemon green or lemon, and they can be brown with age and be more deep brown or medium brown, versus a white wine that can be deep purple or ruby, and in 20-30 years and it can be medium tawny or brown. So the color is also indication of age, like I mentioned. So most white wines are going to be lemon in color. Gold color will indicate either an older wine that was exposed to oxygen during the winemaking, maybe malolactic conversion, maybe a wine that was a little bit riper. Amber color that it means that it has a little bit of browning. So first of all, gold, what golds mean? If you see a touch of gold in the wine, it means the wine is gold. If the color of the white wine has an indication of browning, it's going to be described as amber, and if the wine is brown, it's going to be described as brown. For rosé wines, young wines are going to be pink. If you get a touch of orange in the rosé wines, it is going to be described as salmon, and if the wine is orange, it's going to be described as orange. If there's no pink in it, it will be described as orange. With red wines, wines that are purple are going to be evidently purple. Young red wines can be purple or ruby in color. What I see most commonly now, many wines are actually purple in color. Ruby will be red in the wine, so you're going to be looking if the wine has purple color or ruby color. Garnet is when you have a wine that has a touch of browning, and it's also, of course, the indication of age. And if the wine has more brown and it doesn't really have a ruby or a purple color, it's going to be described as tawny. And then if the wine is if it doesn't have any red color, it's going to be described as brown. usually you're not going to get a tawny or a brown red wine. On the nose, so the nose is when we smell the wine. Again, all the wines that you're going to be tasting on the course are going to be clean. You're not going to get points for that. The point you get 1 point for the intensity. You get 5 points for aroma characteristics, and you get 1 point for the development. So for the intensity of the wine it's a 5-point scale. It can be light, medium, or pronounced, medium, minus, and plus. This is the best way to evaluate this is when you have the wines, of course, in front of you. The wines that are going to be pronounced, they're going to be very easily to detect. Wines that are lacking aromas are going to be described as light, and then we're going to be checking if the wine is medium or medium minus or medium plus in aroma intensity. So you're going to get 1 point. The way that to measure this aroma intensity is by, I always don't start smelling the wine by swirling it. I try to make the glass, start to move the glass towards my nose and see where I'm smelling it. So if you can smell the wine that is without swirling and it's further away from your nose, the wine is going to be described as pronounced. If you put your glass in the glass, if you put your nose in the glass and you still cannot smell anything, the aroma is going to be a light, and then we're going to be tweaking to see if the wine is medium, medium plus, or there's any aroma which would be described as medium minus. So this takes a little bit of practice. In regards to the aroma characteristics, the wines can have primary, secondary, and tertiary character. I'll be showing you the lexicon, which is recommended for you to use. So the primary aromas are aromas of fermentation. So just grapes fermented, you get your primary aromas. Secondary aromas are aromas when the wine finishes the fermentation. Then there's three main winemaking techniques: lees aging, malolactic conversion, and oak aging or oak fermentation. And for the aromas, you're gonna get 5 points. So for example, if the wine is has all primary aromas, you will get points only for description of primary aromas. If the wine has primary and secondary aromas, you need to recognize these secondary aromas and you'll get points for primary and secondary aromas. If the wine has primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas, you need to recognize primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas in order to get all 5 points. Development of the wine can be youthful, developing, fully developed, tired, or past is best. So a youthful wine is described when it has only primary and secondary aromas. If it doesn't show any tertiary character, it is described as youthful. A developing wine is described when there is a hint, indication of tertiary character, tertiary development. A fully developed wine is described when the tertiary character is well integrated in the wine. It is the main aromas in the wine. And the wine, even with the fully developed, should show primary characteristics. A wine that is tired and past is best will not have any primary aromas, and it will have overpowering, unbalanced tertiary development. Not every wine will have secondary aromas. Like for example, Riesling can have primary aromas. Riesling doesn't age in oak and it's a grape variety that can age very well in a bottle and develop tertiary character. This is the lexicon for primary aromas, so I'll show you and we'll go one by one for primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas, and I'll give you guidance on how to use them. So also On the left side, you can use descriptors as delicate or intense, simple or complex, generic or well-defined, fresh or cooked, unripe or ripe or overripe in order to describe the character of the aromas. These are not descriptions that will give you direct points, but if you maybe lack a point somewhere, and if your description for the aromas is correct, like meaning well-defined or generic or simple or complex, you could get a point for that. The clusters that are used for the primary aromas are flower, floral, green fruit, citrus fruit, stone fruit, tropical, red fruit, black fruit, dried or cooked fruit, herbaceous, herbal, pungent, spice, and other. When you're describing the wine on the exam and also on the course, you can use a cluster descriptor, meaning the wine smells like citrus fruit. That is fine, but you will not get points for that. You need to say the specific aroma from that cluster. So instead of saying that the wine has citrus fruit, just say which citrus fruit you think the wine has. For example, lemon or grapefruit, right? So for starting with the flower cluster, acacia, honeysuckle, chamomile, elderflower, they sound like white aroma descriptors. Geranium, I'm not sure what geranium is. I think it's kind of red flowers, but anyway. Blossom, again for white wine descriptor. Rose and violet are descriptions for red wines. So most of the floral descriptors are used for the white wines, but rose and violet are descriptors for red wines. For example, Syrah reminds a lot of violets, Nebbiolo reminds of rose petals. All the others are usually used for aromatic white grape varieties. Green fruit, green citrus, and stone fruit. The way that you're going to be, this is all descriptors for white wines. The way that I recommend for you to use this vocabulary is for you to indicate the ripeness of the grapes. Meaning, if you have a wine that you believe it's coming from a cool climate, you're going to be using descriptors of green and citrus fruit. If you think that the wine is a little bit riper, you're going to be using citrus and stone fruit. If you think that the wine is coming from a warm climate and the grapes are ripe, you're going to be using stone and tropical fruit character. So I don't advise you to specifically think if the wine smells like pineapple or mango, for example. If you believe that the grapes are ripe, which means that they're coming from a warm climate, these are the descriptors that you're going to be using. So you need to, there's a lot of confusion about description of the wines, and you need to understand how to use these descriptors and what they mean. Okay, so I hope this is clear for the white wine. So a Chardonnay from a cool climate will taste like lemon and green apple, where a Chardonnay from a warm climate can taste like peaches and mango, as an example. If it's more restrained, or coming from a more moderate climate, then you can use, for example, peach and lemon characteristics. Okay. For red wines, it's a little bit different. For red wines can either be red fruit dominated, like Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir always has red fruit, versus a Cabernet Sauvignon that always is dominated, it has only black fruit. Sometimes a wine can have red and black fruit characteristics, like for example Merlot, or the wine can be a blend, and then you're going to be using red and black fruit descriptions in a wine. In order for you to give more precise description of the wine, meaning for if you think the wine is coming maybe from a warm climate or a cool climate, or just to explain the ripeness of the grapes, you're going to be using descriptions of unripe, ripe, or overripe, or dried or cooked fruit, for example. This can be used for white wines, but honestly, with white wines, if you describe a wine as a green apple, that's already explaining where do you think the wine is coming from. Where for red wines, you would need to use that additional description in order to give a more precise description of the wine. Dried cooked fruit will indicate fruit that is either a late harvest fruit or it's coming from a warm climate. So you can use descriptors of fig, prune, raisin, sultana, kirsch, jamines, baked stewed fruit, preserved fruits. So fig can indicate a white wine, a red wine, a prune is for red wines, raisin can be also for a red and white wine, sultana, kirsch, jamines. You can use all of this for red and white wines, the whole category. Herbaceousness is on the other, it's the aromas that you're going to be using for wines that you believe are unripe. Maybe they're coming from or well defined. Grapes that are less ripe or have a better definition. For example, when I smell a Cabernet Sauvignon that has a hint of herbaceousness, that for me that's a good quality indicator. It means that the grapes are perfectly ripe. Of course, they have good definition of the fruit, of the primary aromas. I mean, the wine should not be overly herbaceous. That indicates unripe fruit. So herbaceousness, green bell pepper. This is something that is very specific for Sauvignon Blanc, for Carmenere, for Cabernet Sauvignon. So actually, when you smell it, when you notice these aromas, this is a good indication for the development and precision of the fruit. Other aromas that are describing this herbaceousness, this pyrazine in these three grape varieties are grass, tomato leaf, asparagus, blackcurrant leaf. Herbal, eucalyptus, mint, medicinal, lavender, fennel, dill. This is a little bit of mixed, usually indicates maybe a specific grape variety, like for example, fennel is used a lot of times as a descriptor for Verdicchio. Eucalyptus is aroma that can be found in many red wines from Australia, especially from Coonawarra. Mint, it can also be used, for example, for Cabernet Sauvignon. Pungent spices, black and white pepper. Black pepper is a specific aroma for Syrah. That pepper aroma, when it's more riper, meaning it's coming from a warmer climate like Australia, you don't really taste the black pepper. It more smells like licorice. White pepper is aroma that can be used for Grenache and also for Gruner Veltliner grape from Austria. Other aromas like flint, whetstones are usually used for wines that you want to describe as having minerality. Usually minerality in the wine means that the wines are coming from a cooler climate. They are more neutral grape varieties. They're dry, high in acidity, fresh, and made in a protective winemaking with stainless steel tanks and low fermentation temperatures. Wet wool is a specific aroma when you taste, for example, Chenin Blanc. Secondary aromas. So secondary aromas are going to come from three winemaking techniques: yeast, lees autolysis, malactic conversion, and oak. I need to specify that lees and malactic conversions are aromas that are only used for white wines. They're not used for red wines. For red wines, you're going to be using only one secondary aroma, and that is oak. So for yeast means that when the wine finishes the fermentation, the wine can stay on yeast cells, which are going to be like powder. They're going to stay in the powder in the vessel where the wine was fermented, and the winemaker can use this in order to give additional flavor and texture to the wine. Autolysis is the breakdown of the yeast, and these are the aromas that are specifically for champagne styles when the wine stays on the lees for a very long time. So the aromas that are used for the description of lees is biscuit, bread, toast, pastry, brioche, bread dough, and cheese. So usually what I use for the description of the wines that I believe are aging on lees is cheese, bread dough, slightly kind of pastry, but I wouldn't, go too much into this lees aging for still wines. Yes, when you get a sparkling wine, also for me to just to clarify, on the tasting exam, you're just going to be tasting still wines. You're not going to be tasting fortified and sparkling wines. So for still white wines, recognizing the wines having lees, it will be enough to describe them as bread dough, like raw bread dough, and cheese, where these other aromas of biscuit, bread, toast, and pastry, brioche, are more used for sparkling wines made by a traditional method. Malolactic conversion is also a process where, and also just for me to note, yeast, lees aging for white wines, I mostly taste as a texture on the wine, but this is personally for me. So when I taste the wine, if I get like texture on the gums, that is indication of that the wine was aging on lees. Malolactic conversion is also a winemaking choice that produces aromas of buttercream and butter, cheese, and cream. It gives also wines a little bit more texture and richness, and it affects style of the wine heavily. So it's not used for all the wines. Also, malolactic conversion suppresses the primary aromas, so usually aromatic grape varieties do not go through this process because they would lose that definition of the primary aromas, where malolactic conversion can be used for neutral grape varieties like Chardonnay. So malolactic conversion gives the flavor, but it also reduces and softens the acidity in the wine. Oak aromas, so oak aromas will be used for wines that are either fermented or aged in oak. Usually white wines can also ferment in oak and they can age in oak, where usually red wines only age in oak. So descriptors for this are vanilla, cloves, nutmeg, coconut, butterscotch, toast, cedar, charred wood, smoke, chocolate, coffee, raisin. My recommendation is you can use, for example, of course, you're going to be learning about different types of oak and the different way that oak is made. More sweet kind of aromas like vanilla and coconut is used for more American oak that gives more sweet spice, where toast and cedar is more used for a restrained style of oak, which comes from Europe. Charred wood would be a description for a wine that was aged in heavily toasted oak. And then, for example, chocolate and coffee, you're not really going to use these descriptors for white wines. For white wines, it's more about vanilla, coconut, butterscotch, toast. Those are the aromas where, for example, clove, chocolate, coffee can be used for red wines. And on the end, tertiary aromas. Tertiary aromas are either coming from deliberate oxidation, which is more relevant for fortified wines like sherry and port. For still wines, you're going to be using descriptors of bottle age for white and red wines. So these are the descriptors that are used for the wines that are showing tertiary development in the bottle. Some of them are very specific for certain grape varieties, even for wines that are not aged. Like, for example, petrol is used specifically for Riesling, and it can be found in a young and old Riesling. Mushroom aroma is also aroma that is, yes, description for a tertiary character, but it's also aroma for a young Pinot Noir. So these two are the exception. All the rest will indicate if you use this description, is that you believe that wine has tertiary character. Okay. So on the palate, you're gonna get 9 points for the white wines and 10 points for the red wines, additional point because of the tannin. So again, first part of the key to success for the tasting part is remembering the whole SAT. So remember the clusters where you get points, and then also remember the lexicon, how to describe these wines. On the palate, we have the clusters are sweetness, acidity, tannin, alcohol, body. Mousse is used for sparkling wines. Flavor intensity, flavor characteristics, and finish. So starting with sweetness, the wines can be dry, medium sweet, sweet, and luscious. So dry wines are wines that do not have any residual sugar. Lusciously sweet wines this descriptor is reserved for very sweet wines that are usually ice wines and botrytis affected wines made with botrytis grapes like Sauterne and Tokaj. For example, off dry means that the wine has a touch of sweetness. Medium dry means that there's more sweetness present in the wine, and then medium sweet, it means that the wine is, sugar in the wine is well present. Sweet is going to be used for wines that have around more than 40 grams of sugar. Again, this is much easier to when you taste the wine for us to describe it. Most of the wines are going to be dry. There's going to be few wines that are off dry. There's going to be few wines that are going to be lusciously sweet, and then very few wines that are medium dry and medium sweet. So most of the wines are going to be dry, couple of off dry wines, and then a little bit less of this medium dry, medium sweet category, and there's going to be a couple of wines very specific like Tokaj, like Sauterne, that are going to be lusciously sweet. Acidity, it can be low, medium, and high, medium, minus, and plus. Acidity in the wine comes from tartaric acid in the grapes, and it's a great indicator of the climate where the grapes are coming from. So usually wines that are coming from a cool climate, they're going to have high acidity. Some grape varieties also retain acidity very, very well, like for example Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling. There's very few wines that are medium minus or low in acidity, like Viognier and Gewürztraminer. A more medium acidity in the wine indicates more riper grapes that come from warmer climate. Acidity, I need to mention that with dry wines, acidity is more easily to detect and understand, and also the way that you're going to be detecting acidity on the palate is by salivation of your palate. So when you taste the wine and you have a lot of saliva that gets created, this is an indication of high acidity. If your mouth is less watering, it's an indication of lower acidity. Acidity in the sweet wines is more harder to detect because sweetness in the wine masks acidity. But when you taste sweet wines, you need to check this amount of saliva that is created on your palate. That is going to give you a guidance on the acidity in this wine, even if you don't recognize it straight away because of the high sugar content. Tannin is only going to be used for red wines. Tannin can be low, medium, and high, medium, minus, and plus. Tannin gives body and texture to the wine. It comes from the skins of the grapes. It's also indication of either a grape variety. Grapes that have thinner skin, they usually they have lower tannin in the wine, like for example Gamay and Pinot Noir, versus grape varieties like Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon. They have thicker skin and they produce usually higher tannin wines. Alcohol is a 3-point scale, so it can be only low, medium, and high. In regards to the Percentage of alcohol, everything below 12 is considered low. From 12 to 13.9 is high, and 14 plus is considered 12 to 13.9 is medium, and everything above 14 is considered high. Alcohol is more viscous, more heavier than water, and it gives body and richness to the wine. And it's also indication of the climate in the where the grapes are coming from, right? Lighter alcohol wine, it's usually indication either a cold climate or grapes that are picked earlier, where a high alcohol wine is an indication of a warmer climate, where a medium alcohol indicates a more moderate climate. Again, for fortified wines, the alcohol levels are different and are not relevant for the SAT part of the exam. For level 3, it's more for level 4. Body of the wine can be light, medium, full, medium, minus, and plus. Body of the wine, it indicates how heavy the wine feels on the palate. Things that are giving more body to the wine are either residual sugar, lower acidity, higher alcohol, anything that gives more texture to the wine, like oak or malactic conversion or lees. For red wines, that's usually only oak, tannin. Higher tannin red wines are more fuller body, lighter tannin wines are lighter. Wines that have lower alcohol will usually be lighter body. Wines with higher alcohol will be fuller body. So body of the wine is that general impression when you taste the wine, how the body of the wine feels. Mousse is reserved for sparkling wines, again not relevant for level 3 exam. Flavor intensity is the same thing as the nose. As the aroma intensity, it's just the aroma you detect by smelling the wine. The flavor intensity you detect by tasting the wine. So usually what the aroma intensity was on the nose, that is usually confirmed also on the palate. For me personally, I always get more flavor. I get more precise with my descriptions when I taste the wine. So it can be light, medium, pronounced, or medium minus and plus. Again, this is a calibration that is very important to be done when you're in the class and tasting the wine with your educator. For flavor characteristics, again, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and here you're gonna get 3 points. So if the wine is only primary, you're gonna get 3 points for primary descriptors. If the wine is primary and secondary, you're gonna get 3 points from combination of primary and secondary. And if the wine is primary, secondary, and tertiary, you're gonna get 3 points only if you recognize primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas. The finish can be short, medium, long, medium plus or minus. The finish is also a great indicator of quality. Usually outstanding wines or very good to outstanding wines are going to have long finish. Acceptable wines are going to usually have a short finish. The finish is the impression that of the flavors that linger on the palate. So it's not, don't focus on acidity, alcohol, tannin, or sweetness. Focus only on the flavor that lingers on the palate. So if the wine finishes, if the flavors disappear right away, the wine is going to be described as short. If the flavors linger for a very long time, the flavor is considered long, and then everything in between. Again, this is more, it's much better for you when you come to the class and to calibrate your palate like this. Also, just for me to give you a note on alcohol and acidity correlation. Acidity and alcohol are not flavors. They trigger your pain receptors. So like I said, when you taste a wine that's high in acidity, your saliva is more created in order to balance the acidity on your palate. and it also triggers your pain receptors. Alcohol does a similar thing, so it activates your pain receptors, and sometimes people can confuse acidity and alcohol in the wine. So the recommendation is, for acidity, look at that saliva creation. For alcohol, connect alcohol with the ripeness of the grapes. So if the grapes feel riper, usually the alcohol is higher and the acidity is lower. If the alcohol is lower, the acidity is higher and the fruit feels more fresh. And on the end, you have the conclusion. On the conclusion, you get 2 points, one for the quality level, one for readiness for drinking. The quality level can be faulty, poor, acceptable, good, very good, and outstanding. You're not going to get a faulty wine on the course. It's very good for you to try some faulty wines, for you to understand how faulty wine smells, like TCA, like oxidation, like lack of freshness. A poor wine is a wine that can have a fault, but the fault is not really as excessive in a clear faulty wine, and this wine will be poor quality. Again, you're not gonna get a poor wine. You can get an acceptable wine. So when you're judging quality of the wine, you're gonna be using the Blitz system, BLIC, which stands for B for balance, L for length, I for intensity and identifiable characteristics of primary, secondary, and tertiary character, and C is for complexity. So if the wine is perfectly balanced, long finish, intense, well recognizable characteristics, and the wine is complex, the wine is going to be outstanding. If the wine, and you can maybe even consider this Blitz system as points. So outstanding wine will have 4 points, faulty poor wines will not have any points, acceptable wine will have 1.5 to 2 points, a good wine will have 2.5 points, a very good wine will have 3.5 points. So the way to think about this, acceptable wine will have 1.5 point, meaning usually it's going to be fairly balanced with some length, with medium, moderate intensity, more generic aromas, and it's not going to be a complex wine. A good wine is going to be balanced, will have moderate length, moderate intensity, and maybe some complexity. A very good wine will be perfectly balanced with a long finish or longer finish, medium plus finish, with pronounced, well-defined aromas, but will lack complexity. Versus outstanding wine will be a wine that doesn't have any kind of negative comment. That's it for this session. A little bit longer session, but very important one. I hope it's gonna help, and we're gonna reinforce this in a class. And I have full confidence that you're gonna be successful on the tasting part of the exam. I'll see you in the next session. Until then, stay thirsty and wise.